The American Dragon Bryan Danielson will return to All Elite Wrestling. While Bryan was not necessarily in the best place when he left the company back in October of 2024, it does seem more and more likely that Bryan will end up returning to AEW and wrestling when he does. If we go back and look at the build-up to All In 2024, Bryan had been stating that he was suffering from a major neck issue, something that he eventually would need surgery for, and that would likely end his full-time career. Even before that, in the prior year, Bryan had said that he promised his daughter Birdie that his full-time in-ring career would come to an end in 2024. And while we did see Bryan not only win the AEW World Championship at All In 2024, we later saw him being written off of AEW TV in one of the most insane ways possible, with them first suffocating him and then Pillmaning his neck and him being stretchered off into the distance, never to be seen again. Combine that with the real life situation of Bryan's contract. The reality is that Bryan wasn't under an AEW deal even when he won the World Championship. His deal actually ran out in early August, but he was essentially on a handshake deal with AEW while he kind of wrapped things up. So this begged the question, would Bryan eventually go back to WWE? Well, if you listen to what Bryan had to say in the months leading up to that contract running out, he made it clear that he felt like he would stick around in AEW as long as the company needed him to be there. And Bryan has said similar things before. He has stated that he feels like his place in professional wrestling is belonging to a place that needs him the most. And at this moment, WWE is as hot as it's ever been. It is as profitable as it's ever been. It is as big as it's ever been. And it is building as many stars as it's ever built. So for that reason, why would Bryan want to go back to WWE? You combine that with his relationship with Tony Khan, the fact that Tony had said that if anything happened to him that would lead him to not being able to book a show or be out of commission, he told his dad that the person that he would trust the most with the book in AEW would be the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson. That shows you just how close Bryan and Tony are, and it also shows you how committed they are to seeing this vision of AEW play out. And when we talk about the return of Bryan, probably the biggest indicator that this is going to happen was his involvement at the All In media conference earlier this year. Bryan was a big part of that press conference. He had opened it. He was someone who we had not seen on TV for months at that point, yet AEW made a point to tell you that at All In 2025, you should expect to see the American Dragon. And while they downplayed the idea of him wrestling, reports now have indicated that Bryan will likely indeed wrestle at that show, and even wrestle one of the people that turned their back on him in that beatdown back at Wrestle Dream in Wheeler, Utah. Now, while all of that is yet to be determined, we have to talk about what Bryan's return would mean to AEW. It would not only mean a big push for All In, a show that has struggled at this point to sell as many tickets as prior All Ins have. We know that AEW recently has been struggling with at least their TV and selling tickets. That is why we are seeing them move to smaller arenas. And that has also led to a bit of a resurgence in the vibe of these AEW shows. One of the best things about AEW shows used to be the fact that it felt like the crowds were special. And ever since they started to do this new strategy of going to interesting and smaller venues, it has improved the product. And while ticket sales may have been down overall, the vibe is pretty good. But for All In, they need to make a big statement. As of right now, they have sold right around 13,000 tickets. While more than they would for a TV, it is still pretty much in line for how much they would do for any regular pay-per-view. And combine that with the fact that they are in a stadium that could hold 30, 40,000 people if they extended all the seats. They've got some work to do. And I think that Bryan Danielson being a part of that, Bryan Danielson being a part of the build-up to that show is critical. And if we look at the card for All In, it is set to be an insane card. Kazuchika Okada versus Kenny Omega. Christian Cage teaming up with Cope for the first time in almost 2 decades. Athena versus Mercedes Moné for the AEW TBS Championship, and so much more. All In 2025 is going to be an insane time, and it would only be made better with the return of the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson. Now, as far as what Bryan would do once All In wraps up, I think that much is something we already know. Bryan has said that his full-time in-ring career is over, meaning that I would not expect to see Bryan much throughout the next couple of months. I think that they're going to use him more so in a capacity of a special attraction wrestler, someone who comes in for big feuds, someone who comes in for maybe one run and then quietly goes away, maybe doing a backstage producer role, maybe being Tony Khan's right-hand man when it comes to creative, maybe being an executive in the company. All of that is still on the table for the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson. The only question that remains is, how can AEW maximize their use of the American Dragon? How can AEW capitalize on this once-in-a-generational talent who may be at the end of the road when it comes to his career, but one who is still committed to the company, one who is still very much involved with the company, and one who still has a lot of juice and a lot of favorability with the fan base. There's so much that is possible with Bryan Danielson seemingly returning to AEW. There's so many places that they could go and so many different ways to weave this story. But in the end, I guess we'll see.